Father's Day, my daughter secretly withdrew more than $20,000 from our joint account to buy her husband a luxurious cruise, a grand gift with a shocking price tag. And me, the father who raised her into adulthood, only received a $5 lottery ticket, along with a mocking remark. If you win, remember to share with me. The whole table burst into laughter, while my heart felt torn apart. Yet fate played a cruel twist. That seemingly worthless ticket won the jackpot of $85 million, and that was the moment I taught my daughter a lesson she would never forget. Before I continue, please hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you are listening from. I am deeply grateful for that. Let me go on. The candle in the center of the table flickered under a draft from the window. I had tidied the living room more carefully than usual, laid out the beige tablecloth saved from last Thanksgiving, and set a roast with applesauce and a few simple side dishes I had worked on since morning. For me, this Sunday was not just Father's Day. It was one of the rare occasions I could see my daughter walk back into the house that had nurtured her through childhood. Linda arrived with her husband, Charles Grant, right on time. The tires of their shiny new BMW slid into the small yard, almost crushing the modest space of my old wooden house. I waited at the door, forcing a smile as my daughter stepped in, her expensive perfume trailing behind her heels and filling the room. Charles followed, adjusting the button of his dark blue suit, his smile tinged with arrogance, as though his presence alone brightened this aging home. "Happy Father's Day, Dad," Linda said, then immediately dropped a small object onto the table. A thin, carelessly folded slip of paper slid across the cloth and stopped in front of me. I stretched out my calloused fingers and opened it. An old lottery ticket whose numbers had faded was worth exactly $5. "If you win, remember," Linda giggled, her voice half teasing. "Half the money is mine. Everyone here heard me say it." The air froze. I forced the corners of my lips into a smile, but my chest tightened, as if squeezed by an invisible hand. My eyes lingered on the fragile ticket, a gift so flimsy it could never compare to the devotion I had poured into her over the years. The lines on my hand seemed to ache as I held that piece of paper. Before I could say more, Linda turned to her husband, eyes gleaming. "Charles, now for your gift." She pulled a large box from behind her, tied with sparkling golden ribbon. Even the wrapping looked beyond my usual means. Charles raised his eyebrows, whistling softly in anticipation of a treasure. When the lid flipped open, the whole room seemed to inhale at once. 2 luxury cruise tickets, bold letters glowing under the light. "Mediterranean Cruise, first-class cabin." Linda lifted them high like a trophy. $20,000, all to celebrate you, the man who has always stood by this family. "Charles deserves it." Charles's satisfied laughter rang out, mingling with the clinking of glasses. "Now that is a real gift. Linda, you truly know how to show love." Then he glanced at me, his eyes half mocking, half pitying. "You raised your daughter well." The words cut like a knife to my chest. I heard the faint clatter of silverware, relatives avoiding my gaze, pretending to focus on their plates. The atmosphere sank heavy as fog, broken only by the pounding of my heart. I swallowed the bitterness. "What a wonderful gift," I murmured, though it sounded like someone else's voice. Linda laughed, the sharp sound like shattering glass. She nodded proudly at Charles, her face glowing with pride. In that moment, old memories flooded back. Nights in the woodshop, my hands covered in sawdust, staying up late to afford her tuition. I skipped meals so she could have books and better chances. And now, in front of me, she treated a cheap lottery ticket as a joke, while reserving lavish gifts for her in-laws. I drew a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Thank you, Linda," I said, my voice tightening in my throat. "So, thoughtful." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window across the kitchen table, worn with years. I sat alone, a warm mug of black coffee in my hands, laptop open to the bank page. It was a habit I had never abandoned in 40 years, checking every transaction, even living alone, for discipline and reassurance that life remained within reach. The numbers were familiar: electric bill, insurance, groceries, a few small expenses, all routine, until my eyes froze at one line: premium travel services, $20,347. I blinked, thinking I had misread, but the figure remained cold and undeniable. My hand trembled, coffee spilling over the rim, staining the table in pale brown streaks. The images from last night returned: Linda waving the glittering cruise tickets, Charles grinning in satisfaction, the echo of their praises. I knew at once that some was the luxury gift my daughter had so proudly given her husband, but how had she withdrawn it from my account? My heart sank as I remembered. After my wife passed, for safety, I had added Linda's name to my savings account. I thought it wise. If anything happened, she could manage. I never imagined that trust would one day let her take tens of thousands without asking. I grabbed the phone, fingers shaking as I dialed. Each ring felt like a knife cutting deeper. Finally, Linda's voice answered, airy, tinged with annoyance. "Dad? What is it? I'm busy." "Linda," I swallowed hard before speaking, "I'm looking at the bank statement. There's a charge of more than $20,000 to premium travel services. Explain it to me." A pause, then a light, cutting laugh. "Oh, that?" "I booked the cruise for Charles. He deserves it. Simple as that, Dad." The word struck like a hammer. I forced my voice steady. You took money from my account without asking." She inhaled audibly, then shifted to a casual tone, as though I was the unreasonable one. "Dad, it's a joint account. You added me after Mom died, remember? That's family money. Nothing to fuss about. You just let it sit. While Charles has been supporting this family, I only used it to give back to him." I went numb. Yes, the papers were still there, my signature undeniable. But when I added her, I had thought only of emergencies, medical bills, funeral costs, never that she would treat it as a wallet to fund her wealthy in-laws. "Linda," my voice rasped, each word heavy, that money was for my old age. What you did is no different than—" "Stealing?" she cut in, laughing sharply, full of defiance. "No one calls it stealing when it's a joint account. You gave me the right. It's legal. You lost nothing, Dad. It's just sharing." Every sharing was a blade twisting deeper. I remembered freezing nights in the woodshop, hands numb on the saw, just to scrape a few hundred for her tuition. I remembered skip dinners, saving the best bites for my little girl. And now all those sacrifices reduced to a single phrase: family money. I clenched the phone until my knuckles whitened. My voice cracked, thin as thread. "Linda, have you forgotten who I am? I'm not a money machine. I'm your father." On the line, a sigh, cold, dismissive. "You only did what a father should. But Charles is different. He lifted this family, got us into the club, paid for Jake's private school, things you never could. So if anyone deserves gifts, it's Charles, not you." Then came the flat beep, beep, ending the call. I sat frozen, the phone heavy in my hand like a stone on my chest. Outside, sunlight poured carelessly down the street. Children laughed, cars passed. The world kept moving, but I sat there, shattered by my own daughter's words. I covered my face with my hands. I had never felt so old and so alone. The next morning I woke up restless. I had tossed and turned all night, haunted by the image of the cruise tickets, Charles's triumphant grin, and Linda's mocking laugh. I had no choice. I had to act. I brewed a pot of black tea instead of coffee, searching for some quiet. But when I opened my laptop, the blue light of the bank statement pierced my eyes. The charge of $20,347 was gone, yet the wound it left was still raw. I picked up the landline and dialed the bank. The woman's voice on the other end was steady and polite, guiding me step by step through verification. 15 minutes later, Linda's access was erased. The password changed. Security updated. When I heard the final words, "Mr. Hale, now only you have full access," I exhaled. For the first time in days, I felt I had regained a small measure of control. But that relief vanished quickly as the storm hit. My cell phone rang harshly, Linda's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated, then answered, "Dad, my card just got declined at Nordstrom. What the hell did you do?" Her voice sliced the air like a knife. I could hear the bustle of the mall behind her, heels pounding against the floor. "I removed your access. You took money without permission. I cannot let it continue." On the other end, a sharp breath, and then a bitter laugh. "God, you humiliated me in front of the store." I stood there with an $800 bag in my hands. Card declined, staff staring at me like I was broke. Do you know how humiliating that is? I closed my eyes. Silent. Humiliating. That was the word she chose, without a thought, for the humiliation she had poured onto me before the whole family. "Linda, what you did yesterday, taking $20,000 to buy Charles a cruise, that was theft." "You don't understand anything," she snapped. "That's family money. Charles has given our family so much. Jake's private school, the club, the house. And you just hoard your little savings, stingy, old-fashioned. I used it to repay his kindness. What's wrong with that?" My chest tightened. In every word I heard nothing but contempt. No trace of the little girl who once clung to me in tears when she broke her leg, who once called me her hero. "Linda," I tried to keep my voice calm, "I am not stingy. I am protecting what little remains after a lifetime of work. If you despise that, you have forgotten your roots." Her breathing quickened, then dropped into a cold, cutting tone. "You will regret this. You think cutting me off is the end? You'll pay. I have friends, people who stand with me. You won't survive this." Then the line went dead with a harsh click. I sat frozen, the phone still in my hand, trembling. The house fell silent again, but her words echoed in my head like a saw blade grinding against bone. I looked down at my calloused fingers, shaking, these same hands that once carried her, guided her across the street, now left empty. Outside, traffic murmured, and a child called for their mother. Life went on while I sat there realizing the chasm between me and my daughter had become a bottomless pit, and I had already fallen into it. That afternoon, the house sank into thick silence. On the table lay the lottery ticket Linda had tossed at me the night before. Its edges wrinkled, the numbers faded. I stared at it for a long time, as if it were a stain that could never be erased. All those years of fatherhood, I had saved every small gift she made. A messy drawing, a plastic bead bracelet, a card scrawled with, "I love you, Dad." I kept them in a wooden box to remind myself that every sacrifice was worth it. And now the gift from my grown daughter was nothing but a cheap slip of paper, thrown with a sneer. "If you win, remember to share." I reached for it, the paper so thin it felt like it might dissolve in my hand. I clenched it, then suddenly stood. The trash can sat in the corner, smelling of old coffee and cans. Without hesitation, I threw the ticket in. The paper hit the bottom with a dry, final snap. Small, but absolute. Like a verdict delivered, I turned away, exhaling. For a moment, I felt lighter, as though I had cut away a cruel joke my daughter staged to mock me. But the relief didn't last. Minutes later, a hollow emptiness rushed in, choking me. I had thrown away not just a piece of paper, but the memory of the worst Father's Day of my life. And I knew that humiliation would cling to me for a long time. I slipped on a light jacket and stepped outside. The early summer air brushed my face, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from the neighbor's yard, children's laughter at the end of the street, the steady growl of a lawn mower, suburban life's background hum. Mrs. Patterson, the widowed lady tending her tomato plants, looked up and smiled. "Beautiful afternoon, isn't it, Mr. Martin?" I nodded, lips moving but no sound coming out, She bent back to her work, unaware of the storm raging inside me. I walked slowly past each house, each holding a memory. The Hendersons' home, where I once taught Linda to throw a baseball. I remembered the first time she caught it, her laugh, her arms squeezing me tight. Now that memory was buried under her mocking voice and cold stare. A few blocks further, I passed Mr. Chen's grocery. For years I had stopped by for cans of soup, packs of crackers, the simple things that kept me going. He was arranging red apples in a wooden basket, each one placed with care like a ritual. The man was never wealthy, but his eyes always shone with respect for his customers. I felt a lump in my throat, realizing strangers like him treated me with more respect than my own daughter. My feet carried me to the small park where Linda once played on the slide. I sat on a bench, quietly watching children laugh and run. The sound was bright, piercing through my gloom. I remembered Linda as a child, messy hair, flushed cheeks, running to me after every fall. I had sworn to protect her forever, but now I understand. Some wounds don't come from the world outside, they come from your own blood. As the sky darkened, I walked home, legs heavy. Each step pressed deeper into the truth. Linda not only humiliated me at that dinner, but she also believed stealing from her father was her right. Family money was nothing more than a mask for naked greed. When I opened the door, the house was dark and silent. In the trash can, the lottery ticket lay still beneath layers of coffee grounds and scraps of paper, a relic of humiliation. I stopped beside it, staring down for a long time. Then I whispered to myself, "Maybe this is where my life ends, Linda. Your gift. Truly fitting." The wall clock ticked, steadily, reminding me that time went on, while I wandered lost in my own life. The next morning, before I even finished my simple breakfast, slices of bread and a fried egg, the phone buzzed non-stop on the table. First, a message from my sister, Margaret. "Martin, I just saw something Linda posted. Have you seen it? I'm really worried." I frowned and opened Facebook, something I rarely touched except to glance at old family photos. And then my heart froze. On Linda's page, a new post appeared with a picture of her and Charles. "Today I'm heartbroken to share. My own father cut off my access to the family account, humiliating me in front of everyone. And all because I used a small portion to give a gift of gratitude to the man who has supported our family for years, my husband. I never thought my father could be so selfish, so petty. It is sad when the man who was once our pillar becomes a burden." Below, dozens of likes and shares. Comments flowed. "He's old, probably just cranky." "Linda, you're wonderful, and so is Charles. Your dad just doesn't understand." "It's family money. Why hoard it?" Linda is completely right. Each word cut into my chest like a knife. The phone rang again. This time it was Mr. Baker, the neighbor I once shared beers with on rare weekends. His voice was hesitant. "Martin, I just saw online. Is it true you cut your daughter off the account? At your age, do you really need that much money? People are saying you're being stingy." I stayed silent, the silence of a man nailed to the court of public opinion. That afternoon, when I stepped outside to take out the trash, Mrs. Johnson, the neighborhood gossip, was waiting at the corner. She looked me over with a smirk. "People are saying you've lived alone too long, Martin. It's made you selfish. Poor Linda to have a father like that. No wonder she has to vent online." My lips pressed tight, heart pounding, but I said nothing. I knew the more I explained, the more fuel she'd have to spread. By nightfall, the phone rang endlessly. Unknown numbers, anonymous messages, some scolding, some mocking. "Old miser." Shameful when a daughter has to complain online. I sat in the dark, the house utterly still. On the wall, old photos glowed under the dim lamp. Linda as a child, smiling bright in a blue dress, clutching a ball bigger than herself. I remembered when just a $2 ice cream cone was enough to make her happy. Now she smeared her own father before the world for money and vanity. I felt it sharply. Not only had I lost her respect, but I had lost my standing in the community. Neighbors looked at me differently. Acquaintances believed her words. A lifetime of modest reputation drowned by a single Facebook post. I lifted my head, listening to the wind slipping through the window cracks. Tonight was colder than usual, not from the air, but from the spreading chill of isolation. At that point, I knew I had reached a new bottom, betrayed not only by my own blood, but abandoned by the world around me. For 3 days after the storm on social media, I lived in near silence. At the market, vendors looked at me with half pity, half distance. Sweeping the porch, I caught Mrs. Johnson whispering with another neighbor, certainly about the stingy old man. Even the mailman lingered less, slipping letters into the box quickly before hurrying off. I barely opened the windows anymore. The house stayed dark, lit only by the weak yellow glow on the wall, reflecting old photos. I sat in my armchair, remote loose in my hand, flipping channels without focus. Meals were careless. Reheated soup, stale bread. The shame seeped in, dulling every taste until nothing had flavor. On the third night, as the clock struck 8, I stopped at a local channel. The familiar Powerball drawing lit the screen. The host, in a bright suit, smiled widely, voice booming with excitement. "Good evening, Ohio. Tonight's jackpot has rolled over to $85 million. I let out a dry laugh. 85 million, an impossible figure, meaningless to an old man like me, shunned by his neighborhood over a few tens of thousands in so-called family money. Yet, as the white balls clattered into the drum, my heart skipped hard. The host's voice rang out. Tonight's winning numbers are 7, 14, 23, 35, 42, and the Powerball 18. I froze. Those numbers, eerily familiar. My memory spun, then locked onto that crumpled slip Linda had tossed across the dinner table. The lottery ticket I had held and then thrown into the trash. In an instant, my body burned hot. I shot to my feet, knocking the chair back. The kitchen was dark, save for the clock's tick and the pounding of my heart. I rushed to the trash can in the corner. The lid flew open, the stench of old coffee and scraps rising sharply. My hands dug through layers of cans, wet tissues, and greasy bags. My fingers brushed against something crumpled, damp. I pulled it out. It was the ticket. Stained, wrinkled, edges soaked in coffee, but the numbers are still visible. I carried it to the sink, rinsed it gently, and blotted it dry. My eyes locked onto the printed line, 7-14-23-35-42- Powerball. 18. Each number matched perfectly with the winning draw. In that moment, the whole house spun. I collapsed into a chair, clutching the damp paper. A worthless ticket, thrown at me like a joke, tossed by me like trash, now holding $85 million. My breath came ragged, sweat dripping from my brow. Emotions swirled. Shock, disbelief, then something else. Not joy, not triumph, but bitterness. Because to reach this moment, I had endured scorn, shame, and betrayal from my own child. I leaned back in my chair, eyes shut tight. Behind the darkness of my eyelids, I saw Linda again, her shrill laughter, her hand tossing the ticket across the table like trash. Her voice echoed, "If you win, Dad, remember, half is mine." Those words had now become the hollow voice of greed, and I knew that if Linda or Charles ever discovered the truth, the next storm would be fiercer than anything I had endured. I opened my eyes, staring at the ticket in my hand. The yellow lamplight cast a glow, making the numbers blaze bright. Fate had handed me a double-edged blade. It could save me, or destroy me. And for the first time in weeks of humiliation, I felt a spark inside, part excitement, part dread, part resolve. The next morning I rose earlier than usual. Dawn was faint, dew clung to the windows, and the world looked like a dusted painting. I sat at the kitchen table, the ticket pressed flat inside a plastic sleeve. The paper was wrinkled, edges stained with coffee, but the numbers stood clear, etched like a summons from destiny. My calloused hands trembled as I held it up. Part of me still couldn't believe it. How could it be that a mocking gift, thrown into the trash, had become the key to $85 million? I slipped on my worn coat, tucked the ticket carefully inside my inner pocket, and drove my old pickup toward the city. Morning traffic swarmed, red and green lights flashing across the windshield. My heart thudded with every turn of the wheels. I felt as though everyone around me somehow knew the secret I carried. The Ohio Lottery Commission headquarters loomed ahead, a sleek glass building, sharp and modern, so unlike my weathered frame. I parked, drew a deep breath, and walked inside. The automatic doors parted, releasing a cold gust of air laced with polish and paper. At the reception, a young woman greeted me with a professional smile. I slid the ticket forward. She glanced at it, raised an eyebrow. "Would you like to verify its value, sir?" "Yes, I believe it's a winning ticket." My voice was so faint I barely heard it myself. She took it with gloved hands, set it in a tray, and carried it into the back room. Minutes stretched like hours. I sat waiting, eyes drifting to the news on the wall-mounted screen, sweat tracing down my temple, my palms damp. At last, a middle-aged woman emerged, her badge reading Janet Chen, verification officer. She sat across from me, a slim folder in her hands. "Mr. Hale, we scanned and confirmed. The ticket is valid. Congratulations. You've won the jackpot of $85 million. My heart stopped. I gripped the chair, feeling my body float. I wanted to laugh, but my throat locked tight. Only a hoarse whisper escaped. "Is it real?" Janet smiled, nodding. "Yes. But by law, for prizes over $1 million, we require enhanced verification. Your ticket will be sealed and rechecked. You'll need to wait 48 hours before claiming officially." She slid a stack of forms toward me. Payout options, tax details, legal and financial advisor, recommendations. Her words washed over me like wind. I could barely absorb them. I signed the receipt, my ID photocopied. Then Janet added, calm but warm, "You wouldn't believe the stories we've seen. But it's rare anyone finds their ticket in the trash. You're luckier than most." I forced a smile. The word luck pressed against a raw wound. To reach this point, I had trudged through shame, betrayal, and scorn from my own blood. When I stepped back, outside, the noon sun blazed down on the pavement. I squinted, the light sharper than ever. Yet creeping behind it was a darker thought. Linda. If she knew, if she found out, the storm to come would be worse than all the rest. I slid into my truck, sitting still for a long moment. For the first time in weeks, my lips curled faintly. Not a full smile, but the crooked grin of a man who realized fate had just armed him with a razor-edged blade. And now I would have to decide how to wield it. That afternoon, still reeling from the lottery office, screeching brakes shattered the quiet outside my house. I peered through the window. Charles's BMW tore into the driveway, tires grinding the gravel, dust rising thick. The doors flew open. Linda stormed out first, a tight red dress clinging, eyes blazing. Charles followed, shirt stretched taut, face set like a man ready for court. They didn't knock. Linda burst into the house, heels pounding my old wooden floor like hammers. "Dad!" Her voice cracked high, rattling the walls. "I heard. You won. That ticket is mine." I sat at the kitchen table, slowly setting my teacup down, forcing calm into my voice. "Linda, that was a gift you gave me. You put it in my hand, in front of everyone. A gift cannot be taken back." Charles cut in, his tone low but edged with threat. "We have witnesses." The whole table heard Linda say, "If it wins, we split it." That was an agreement, an oral contract. Legally, we have a claim. I looked him straight in the eye, saw the cold calculation there. Then she turned to Linda. Her eyes shimmered with greed, though they flickered with unease. You know you were joking, half serious, half playful, and even if not, it was still a gift. Once given, it belongs to the receiver. Linda slammed her hand on the table, rattling my papers. I wasn't joking. I made it clear. And now you plan to hoard 85 million, leaving your own daughter with nothing? You'll die a selfish old man? The words sliced through me. I drew a deep breath, answering hoarsely but firmly. Linda, you stole from me to buy that ticket. That money wasn't yours. You turned it into a lottery slip and tossed it at me like a joke. From that moment, it was mine. Not yours, not Charles's. Silence stretched. Then Charles smirked, though his eyes sparked with fury. You really think you can hold on to it? Old man, you don't know the law. The media will side with us. Linda is your blood. You'll be painted as the... Ah, thief! Linda jumped in, voice cracking with tension. I'll sue you, Dad. I'll take you to court. I'll prove I bought the ticket. It's my right. I stood. The kitchen shrank around us, air heavy. In front of me wasn't the little girl who once curled in my lap with a storybook, but a stranger, someone who saw me only as an obstacle to treasure. Do whatever you want, I said, voice unnervingly calm. But the truth doesn't change. You gave it to me. It was a Father's Day gift, and gifts cannot be reclaimed. Linda bit her lip, eyes wet, not from sorrow, but from the sting of defeat. She spun, hissing through clenched teeth. You'll pay for this. You'll see what I can do. The door slammed like thunder. I stood frozen, breath unsteady. Outside, the engine roared. Tires screeched, and then silence. The house fell still again. I sat down, my hands trembling. In that moment, I understood. This fight was no longer father against daughter. It was war against the law, against the crowd, and against the army. Linda would gather to her side. I glanced at the table, the print of her hand still fresh, and I told myself, if my daughter wants to turn blood ties into a courtroom battle, then I'll let the light of truth bear witness. I had thought that after the fierce clash in my kitchen, Linda and Charles would cool down, but I was wrong. They did not retreat. On the contrary, they launched an all-out campaign. Just one day later, social media was flooded with words sharp as knives. Linda posted again, attaching a photo of me at the dinner table, the harsh light exaggerating every wrinkle on my face. My father stole the lottery ticket I bought with my own money. I gave it to him as a gift, with one clear condition. If it won, we would split it. But when it actually won, he swallowed the entire 85 million and abandoned his family. Heartbreaking when your own father values money over love. Charles immediately shared it on LinkedIn, where he had his network of colleagues. It is devastating to watch an old father corrupted by money. This is a textbook case of reverse elder abuse, when the elder exploits their position to rob from their children. Linda and I are deeply hurt. Their words spread faster than I could breathe. Messages pelted my phone like hail. A longtime customer of my workshop wrote bluntly, "Sorry, I have to cancel the cabinet order. My family doesn't want to be involved in this scandal." A business partner called, his tone regretful. "Mr. Hale, I respect your craft, but your name is all over the internet. I can't risk my brand being tied to you." My body froze, sweat slicking my palm as I clutched the phone. Years of trust, built plank by plank, joint by joint, collapsed in a moment under Linda's lies. That afternoon, when I went to fetch the mail, Mrs. Johnson, the neighborhood gossip, was waiting at the corner. She didn't bother to hide the scorn in her eyes. "People say you've grown greedy with age, too blind to see reason. Poor Linda, having a father like that." I wanted to shout, to defend myself, but I knew any words would only feed her tongue. The whole neighborhood became a prison without walls. I heard whispers behind my back whenever I stepped outside. Children who used to run over for candy were now pulled back by their parents. That evening the phone rang nonstop. A distant relative called, voice sharp with blame. "Uncle Martin, how could you do that to Linda? She's been crying all week. People say you're greedy. willing to cut off your own family over money. I stayed silent, drained of strength to argue. All I heard was the pounding of blood in my ears, my heart heavy as stone. The next morning I entered my workshop. The silence there was worse. Where once the air buzzed with the saw's rasp and the planer's scrape, now only emptiness echoed. Orders pinned to the board had vanished, cancelled. On the table, just scraps of wood and a fine layer of dust. I sat in the old chair I had built in my youth, my calloused hands resting on my knees. For the first time, I felt my life's honest labor erased by a few poisonous lines on a screen. By late afternoon, I trudged home past Henderson's yard. I heard them whispering. Mr. Henderson, once my Sunday coffee companion, only nodded faintly, avoiding my eyes. I knew he, too, had chosen to believe Linda. Isolation tightened around me like a net. My work, my friends, my neighbors, even my family, all turned away. That night, I sat alone in the darkened living room. The lamp cast a weak shadow across the wall, where old photos hung. Linda as a child, smiling bright, cradled in my arms. Those days seemed like a dream from another life. Tears burned down my cheeks. I had hit rock bottom. Never in my years had I been so humiliated, reduced from a hard-working father to a greedy thief stealing from his child. The clock ticked on, my chest hollowed. If I died tomorrow, I thought, people would remember me not as a craftsman, but as the stingy old man hoarding a lottery ticket. In that darkness, I asked myself, how can I ever clear this stain? 2 days later, still shunned, I sat in my living room. Silence pressed down, broken only by the clock's tick. I was nearly empty, body and spirit. Then the phone rang, its buzz like a summons from the grave. On the screen, an unfamiliar number, but formatted like a company line. I answered, my voice hoarse. "Hello?" Martin Hale speaking. A deep male voice replied, slow and commanding. "Mr. Hale, this is Walter Grant, Charles's father. We need to talk." I froze. Walter Grant, a name I knew well. A seasoned businessman, respected for his principles. I had never spoken to him directly. Linda often boasted that Charles was raised in a distinguished family, with discipline and honor. And now Walter himself was calling me. I'm not sure there's anything for us to discuss, Mr. Grant," I stammered, trying to steady myself. Walter's exhale came crisp through the line, then his voice firm. "There's plenty." I was there, at Father's Day dinner. I saw Linda hand you the ticket, calling it a gift. There was no agreement to share. And I cannot stay silent while my son and Linda defame you. My heart thudded so hard I sank back into the chair. In these long, dark days, it was the first voice to stand with me. What will you do?" I asked, trembling. "I will tell the truth," Walter said at once. "I raised Charles to value honor and duty. He has betrayed those values. I cannot allow this lie to continue. I will make a public statement." The next morning we met at a small diner downtown, Murphy's Diner, a place for working folks, nothing like the glossy haunts Charles preferred. Walter arrived in a navy suit, tall and solid, silver hair neatly combed. His handshake was firm, needing no words. We sat and ordered black coffee. The waitress, who knew me well, looked startled to see me with such a figure. Walter got straight to the point. "Mr. Hale, I will issue a public declaration. I will state plainly. Linda gave you the ticket as a gift. That is the truth. The public must hear it." I met his eyes, steady, unwavering. In him I saw a reflection of myself, a father disillusioned by a wayward child. "You're not afraid of your family's reputation suffering?" I asked. Walter let out a wry laugh, his gaze shadowed with sorrow. "Reputation only matters when tied to truth. My son has forgotten that. I cannot." That very afternoon, Walter posted his statement on LinkedIn, where thousands of professionals followed him. "I, Walter Grant, confirm I was present at the recent Father's Day dinner. I witnessed Linda Hale hand her father a lottery ticket, calling it a gift. There was no agreement to share the winnings. The truth is being distorted. I cannot remain silent while a good man is slandered by my own family. Within an hour, hundreds of comments poured in. Entrepreneurs, colleagues, respected voices, all backing him. Walter Grant has never lied. If he says it, we must reconsider the story. I sat in my quiet home, reading each word, each show of support. Tears blurred my eyes, not from joy, but from relief that someone dared to defend the truth. Linda could manipulate social media. Charles could brandish lawyers. But Walter's intervention, Charles's own father, was lightning. It shook the narrative. That evening, sitting on my porch as the breeze rustled the trees, for the first time in many dark days, I felt my chest loosen. The battle was far from over, but I was no longer alone. The next morning, I pulled on my old Navy suit, the only one that still fit, bought years ago for my wife's funeral. I stood before the mirror, adjusting the tie. The face staring back was lined with age, but in my eyes I saw something I hadn't, in a long time, resolve. The Ohio Lottery Commission held a public ceremony at their Columbus headquarters. They said that in a case as disputed as mine, transparency was best. I nodded in agreement. Part of me trembled with fear, but another part knew this was my only chance to reclaim my honor. The hall blazed with camera lights. The state lottery logo filled the backdrop, a giant check for $85 million waiting at center stage. Reporters crowded in, microphones aimed at the podium. I stepped forward, the crack of shutters echoing. The commission's director handed me the check and shook my hand. Applause broke out, congratulations, but also the signal that the next storm had begun. "Mr. Hale, how do you feel becoming a millionaire?" a reporter called. I gripped the microphone, drew a deep breath. I never thought I'd see this day. I've lived frugally, worked honestly all my life. This ticket came to me as a gift of fate. I intend to use it to live with purpose, to help others, and to keep what dignity I have left. No sooner had I finished than a voice ripped through the air. "Don't believe him. That ticket is mine." I turned. Linda and Charles forced their way past security, storming the crowd. Linda in an expensive dress, face flushed, eyes blazing. Charles at her side, booming, "He stole it from his own daughter. This is outright theft." The room erupted. Cameras swung toward them. A microphone thrust before Linda. "Can you clarify? Was this your ticket?" "Yes," she shouted. "I bought it with my own money. Gave it to him with the agreement to split. He betrayed his own daughter, hoarding $85 million. My heart pounded, but I held firm. Facing the cameras, I said, "That ticket was placed in my hand in front of witnesses, clearly called a Father's Day gift. A gift cannot be reclaimed, and I made no agreement." The uproar surged louder. I knew that if left here, public opinion would tilt to Linda again. But then a steady voice cut through. "I was there. I am a witness." Heads turned. Walter Grant, Charles's father, strode forward, tall and silver-haired, suit immaculate. He took the mic, his voice strong. "I saw Linda give Mr. Hale the ticket, calling it a gift. There was no agreement, no promise of splitting. That is the truth, and I will not stand by while lies destroy a man's honor." The hall fell silent, then exploded. Reporters swarmed Walter, firing questions. Cameras swung onto Linda and Charles. Their faces drained pale. "Dad, you're betraying your own son?" Linda screamed. Walter's gaze was stern. "No, I am speaking the truth. It is you who betrayed family values." His words sliced through their pretense. The crowd buzzed, but now the current of whispers turned toward me. A reporter held out a mic. "Mr. Hale, any final words after these disputes?" My throat burned, but my voice rang clear. "I never wanted private family matters dragged into the open, but truth cannot be denied. I have stolen nothing. I have kept only the gift my daughter placed in my hand, and I will use it not for pride, but to live out my remaining years with integrity." For a breath, the hall stilled. Then applause crashed like waves. I stood there, the lights pouring down, a burden in my chest lifting. In the crowd, Linda buried her face in her hands, Charles dragging her away, his face twisted with rage. Walter remained by my side, nodding, a quiet affirmation, "You are not alone." As I left the stage, I knew the battle was not finished. But for the first time in months, the scales of public opinion tilted toward me. And more than that, I had reclaimed what mattered most, my honor. The ceremony ended in a storm of flashes and clapping. I left Columbus at dusk, my mind spinning. Public sympathy now leaned my way, yet my heart was heavy, because the person who screamed against me was still my daughter, the same girl I once held when she first stumbled her steps. That night, at home in the quiet living room, a steaming cup of tea before me, I thought I might finally rest in peace. But then headlights swept across my window. A car had stopped outside. I pulled the curtain. Linda, her dress was wrinkled, hair tangled, makeup smeared. The proud face from earlier now sagged, eyes swollen red. She walked to the door, shoulders slumped. 3 soft knocks. Not demanding, not arrogant, but timid, trembling. I hesitated, then opened. Linda looked up, voice hoarse. "Dad, may I come in?" I stepped aside. She entered unsteadily, sat on the sofa, hands twisting in her lap, silence stretched. Finally her voice cracked. "I'm sorry for today. I lost control. I was just so afraid." I watched her, silent. Tears rolled down her cheeks, splashing her clasped fingers, but my heart was no longer so easily swayed. I waited. "Eric, his company is drowning in debt. The bank is about to seize the house. Credit cards frozen. We owe over 400,000. Do you understand? If we lose the house, if Jake loses his school, I don't know what to do." Her eyes pleaded. I remembered that look. So many times before. For tuition, for a car, for another sacrifice. And each time I had said yes, though it left me with nothing. "Dad, just 1 million. To you now, that's nothing. But to us, it's everything. 1 million, I swear I'll pay back. I promise." I inhaled. Her words dragging me back into old patterns. The father who gives, who sacrifices, no matter the cost. But now I saw it plainly. Her tears were tools, her promises passageways into my pity. "Linda," I said slowly, firmly, "you once took money without asking. You smeared me before family, neighbors, the world online. You stormed the lottery stage, accusing me of theft, and now you ask me to reward you with $1 million? Do you think that's fair?" Linda broke into sobs, covering her face. "I know. I was wrong, but Dad, I'll lose everything. Jake, my son, he will suffer." My chest clenched at my grandson's name. But I steadied myself. Jake needs to learn how to live rightly, not how to rely on tainted money. I will not feed this habit anymore. Her hands dropped, her eyes flashing fury. "So you'll let me lose everything while you sit on a mountain of cash? Money has changed you, Dad. It's made you cruel." I rose, meeting her gaze. "No, Linda. Money hasn't changed me. Money has finally made me strong enough to stop being used." The air froze. Linda stood, voice breaking. "Then you'll never see me again? Don't expect to see your grandson either." My eyes shut. The words cut deep. But when I opened them, my tone was calm. "If that's your choice, I will bear it." "I lost you long ago, Linda. Tonight only proves it." She stared at me, torn between despair and rage. Then she spun away, heels pounding, the door slamming. Her car roared into the night. Silence fell again. I stood at the window, watching her taillights fade. Inside me, no storm, just emptiness, and a sorrow that seemed bottomless. Yet somewhere in that darkness, I felt something else. The snap of a chain breaking. A chain of distorted fatherhood that had bound me for years. 3 months have passed since the $85 million check was placed in my hands. Time has flowed like a rushing river, sweeping away all that was rotten and leaving me with an unexpected calm. I left the old house on Maple Street, not because I was ashamed of neighbors who once turned their backs, but because I needed a new beginning. I chose a smaller town, quieter, where people were not drowned in social media and gossip. My new home wasn't a mansion, but a warm, spacious wooden house with a large garage in back. I needed that space for what I had been dreaming of, a new workshop, Woods and Sons Carpentry. I named it so, though there was only me. The sons were symbolic, the young men I hired from the community, boys without fathers or struggling single dads who needed steady work. On the first day, I handed each of them a brand new tool set. Their eyes lit up. In them, I saw myself 40 years ago, hands trembling the first time I held a saw, heart burning with the hunger to prove my worth. Our first project was restoring an old dining table for a poor family. I will never forget the moment we delivered it, gleaming and whole, its wood grain glowing again. The young mother clutched her child, her eyes wet. Thank you. I never thought my father's table could live again. My heart warmed. Every plank, every nail, every stroke of the plane felt like it was healing my own wounds. With the money, I went further. I created the Single Father Foundation to help struggling dads. From small scholarships for their children to fixing leaking roofs, each project made me feel the money was finally in its rightful place. News about me still appeared in the papers, but no longer paired with greedy or thief. Now it read, "Lottery millionaire builds charity for single fathers." I read those words with a quiet smile. I didn't need fame, but I needed the world to know I'd not turned into the cruel man Linda once painted. Sometimes the past still rose unbidden. One afternoon, as I shaped wood, I remembered Linda's laughter as a little girl riding on my bicycle. The memory cut both ways, sweet and bitter. I wondered, where were she and Charles now? Had the bank taken their luxury house? Was Jake still in private school? Unknown numbers still flashed on my phone. Once or twice I thought it was Linda, but I never answered. Part of my heart was still soft, but the rest knew. If I opened the door even once, the cycle of exploitation, forgiveness, and betrayal would start again. In the evenings, I locked up the shop, watching sunset spill across fresh-cut beams. On the wall hung small signs, integrity before profit. Not just a motto, but a creed I wanted to pass on to the young men working at my side. I knew Linda might still hate me, Charles might still rant, but here among honest workers and children being helped, I had found peace again. On my desk, framed in wood, I kept not the original ticket, it had been turned in, but a photocopy alongside the official certificate. I hung it not to boast, but to remind myself, sometimes the thing most discarded becomes the turning point. One evening I sat in the shop as the last rays of light glowed across the glass. Reflecting those familiar numbers, I switched off the lights, locked the door, and walked slowly back to my little house. Inside me rose a sense of completion, as though the storm had at last found its rhythm of calm. Outside, I heard laughter, the young men lingering, tidying tools. Their voices rang fresh, innocent. In that moment, I realized this was my true fortune. Not the mountain of money in the bank, but a small community that believed in honest work and integrity. Linda no longer came. Charles disappeared after his company collapsed. They faded from my life like shadows. Only memories remained, painful but necessary. I was no longer angry. Now those memories were like scars, not beautiful, but proof I had survived. At night I sat by the window, gazing at a sky scattered with stars. A thought came. Dignity, once kept, is worth more than any number. I sipped my tea and smiled faintly. I knew I had walked a full circle, from light into darkness and back again, and that lottery ticket, framed in wood, would forever remind me. Sometimes the thing most despised is what changes everything. If you enjoyed this story, take a second to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapters. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Each one is fuel that helps us bring you more heartfelt and dramatic tales. Share this video with friends and family so they too can feel the message. Money can change lives, but only dignity keeps us standing strong. Thank you for listening. See you in the next story. Is this conversation helpful so far?